Hello everyone, can you hear me? Hey! Welcome back from lunch everyone, which was kindly sponsored by our friends at Silverchair. Thank you for that. Hope you enjoyed the food and the excellent lightning talks. Shameless. It is now time for our workshop feedback session. Can I please ask the lucky people who've either volunteered or been press ganged into providing the feedback, if you can please congregate at the side of the stage here while I just make some opening remarks, that would be terrific. And if you can be in order, A, B, C, D, that would be even more helpful, thank you. Okay, before we get into the feedback, I'd just like to say a couple of thank yous. Thank you number one is from all of us in the room, and especially from the organising team, to the workshop facilitators. I know from experience over the last couple of years of doing this in a really excellent team that it takes a huge amount of preparation and planning before the event. We started reaching out to people and discussing proposals last summer. Planning really got underway in earnest October through November, and I know there's been a lot of really hard work leading up to this, and there's a lot of running around behind the scenes making this happen and joining the dots by your facilitators during and in between the sessions. So can I please ask for a round of applause for our facilitators? Thank you. And the second thing, it's a little cheesy, but I do want to say this. On behalf of the facilitators and the organising team, thank you to everyone here. These workshops, they take a lot of planning and careful organising, but they're only as good as the conversations and the engagement from all of you. So thank you for turning up to the sessions. Thank you for being engaged. And we're really looking forward to hearing the feedback. So well done all of you as well. Yes. That has given time for everyone to congregate, which was the reason for doing that. So I'd like to invite Workshop A, please, to come up and to share their feedback.
Hi everyone, my name's Lizzie Hay. I'm from Editorial Office, and I was one of the facilitators for Workshop A, which was looking at responsible AI use in scholarly writing. So, here is a spoken song about responsible AI in scholarly writing. I should say this was written by Copilot. We gathered in a room with a question on our minds. How do we use AI and how do we draw the lines? We started by defining what responsible should mean, mapped our own opinions, some cautious, some keen. 31 of 40 said, use it, but be fair, while policies are lagging somewhere far back in the air. We talked about the purpose, is it teaching, is it speed? And IP crept in quietly like, hey, don't forget about me. Should we disclose? Yes, we suppose. Keep it simple, early, clear, that's the way it flows. Granular or brief, we're still not sure, but accountability's a door we can't ignore. Or, oh, should we disclose? Yes, mostly yes, and try not to over-engineer the rest. Then we drafted up some guidelines, headings, visuals, the lot, a checklist full of promise, though sustainability, maybe not. Authenticity was raised, where responses still feel real, and checklists don't mean much if folks ignore what they reveal. Session 3 turned to templates for disclosure done right, SWOT by author, reader, publisher, insight. We tested all the tools, guided, Enargo, attribution to, each one kind of helpful, though none the perfect view. Should we disclose? Yes, we suppose. Keep it honest, keep it human, keep it something people know. Where and when and how, we're figuring out. But hiding it entirely, that's what this song's about. Oh, should we disclose? Yes, mostly yes, and try not to over-engineer the rest. Now we're writing up our findings, sharing back with everyone, telling tool creators what they missed and what still must be done, pushing for early stage support, not just journals at the gate, and global standards rising as STM collaborates. Should we disclose? Yes, we suppose. It's a simple little step to keep the process on its toes. Guardrails up, but future's bright. We're building this together and we're getting it right. Oh, should we disclose? Yes, mostly yes, and try not to over-engineer the rest. Thank you.
Well, we weren't expecting that. Thanks for that. Oh, by the way, yeah, you need to do a poem or a song. Thanks. And there are some fantastic photos as well from the group. So, yeah. And actually, we were lucky enough, Jane and I and some of the other organisers, to go into the rooms and sort of mingle in and see what was going on. And, yeah, there were fantastic discussions. With that, I'd like to introduce Group B to come and share their feedback, please.
Hello, I'm Joe McKenzie. I'm from Wiley Partner Solutions. My feedback will be in the form of an interpretive dance. No. So mine is much more boring. We had incentives to peer review. The workshop was not boring. My feedback will be. The main goal of it was to develop testable solutions, improve the quality and speed of peer review, specifically looking at incentives and how we can use those to support those goals. So we had 3 sessions, first one being kind of brainstorming just ideas of what are incentives in peer review, what can we do, what kind of different types of incentives are there, monetary, non-monetary being the 2 main categories that we fell into. Second session, we had a great presentation from the professor, written down his name, so I'll get it right, Tommaso Valetti, professor of economics at Imperial, just talking about the economics and psychology of incentives. And then we had a bit of a devising challenge where we split into groups and we came up with a few models. And then this third session today, we refined those down to 2 main models, one monetary, one non-monetary, and just kind of poked holes in each other's ideas. It was quite a fun way of saying, something a little bit ambitious, something that is can be wild enough to get people going, and I think we had some pretty heated discussion at some times, but still kind of hopefully trying to tie it back to something that could actually be achieved in some reasonable future. The conclusions, I'll go over them briefly, what the 2 models that we landed on were. There was a non-monetary model, which was about review reciprocity. Basically, when someone's paper is sent to peer review, they agree to produce 2 peer review reports for the journal in future, and then to have that sort of buy-in at the publication stage, hopefully to get this sense of community going with the people submitting to that journal. And then the monetary option being a completely productized new idea of this pan-publisher reviewer marketplace, kind of like Fiverr for reviewers, where people can come in and bid the amount of money that they would give their reviews. There was some discussion of how feasible this all would be, but I think it could, maybe will end up being an interesting kind of market experiment, if anything else. Next steps being, we're going to write a white paper. A few of us from the group are going to collaborate on something like that to flesh out these ideas a bit further and see if the conversation can continue. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Joe. That's terrific. Did anyone in Group B who were lucky enough to have the Prince's Room, did you discover the whispering trick? Those of us who have been in there in previous years. It's got a vaulted ceiling, and if you stand in one corner and whisper, people in the opposite corner can hear you. So you'll now be thinking, oh, God, we had a chat about so-and-so. Let's move on swiftly. Group C, please come up and share your feedback. Anchor and Nancy.
My interpretive dance line has been stolen, so I guess we'll just go straight in. So we were the group talking about book metadata, complexities in the metadata supply chain, which we sort of agreed was a topic we thought we'd been talking about for a long time, but it turned out there was still a lot to say. So in terms of our approach, we split our group. We're a small but mighty group, and we split into publishers on one side and end users, aggregators on the other, because we felt there would be different conversations to have. On the decks there, you can see the flow charts that we started drawing and then realized it was all too complex. But I think that really shows the complexity of this world and how quickly it's changing. So what we wanted to do was map that out as a first stage, then look at what the pain points were, and then come together as a group and try to find some solutions. So I'm going to hand over to Anka, who's going to talk a little bit about what we learned.
Hello. So I'll not go into each of those because we do not have time for that, but it was in general the idea that on the one hand it's a very old problem. We've been talking about metadata for books for ages, and there still is a bit of a disconnect between what is generated by the publishers and what is most useful for downstream. And actually, although the expectation is that with digital it's all going to be easier, it looks like it's actually not, because there's also an expectation that there is more flexibility, that more metadata can be added along the way, that it's easier to change things, so you get into versioning problems. And on this slide, you can see that although there are differences in the two lists, there's also a lot that is common if you look at it. The data and gaps and the accuracy and versioning and variety in standards, they're all related. And now I'll hand over back to Nancy again.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so we sort of tried to harmonise all this down into a problem statement, which we realised too late should probably have been on the previous slide. But anyway, I think what we crystallised it down to was that what we've got is not really fit for purpose anymore. We've got standards that we're using, like ONIX, which don't serve libraries very well. We've got new requirements coming in to track different types of content. And the problem is the standards don't necessarily always reflect the research environment we're in. So research language changes, the way we talk about different types of research changes. So we had a bit of a brainstorm with the whole group. We came up with a few different ideas, which we throw out here for your delectation. In the short term, we did feel that there could have been more work if we'd had more time that we could have done on sort of mapping those standards and how they relate to each other. So how can we get metadata out of our books processes that might serve librarians better, for example. And we thought that there was a need for a solution to handle ambiguous or incomplete data, because what happens at the moment is people are all filling it in their own way, and there's obviously then the standard ceases to have real value. We talked a bit about AI and whether this could solve all our problems, because we all like to believe that it can. But what we concluded was actually there was a sort of medium-term step in just building bridges between all these places where data is held in different systems and in different ways, so that there could be feedback loops from librarians to publishers, and that people could reach enhanced data if that was useful for them. And then the blue sky piece, where we just threw away the checkbook and said, money, no object, what would we like to do? We thought that potentially there is a use case for some kind of tool that can help to translate between these different metadata standards. That might be an AI tool, or it might be something simpler. We didn't have time to nail that. We also talked about the fact that in journals, the full text of the article is held often within the metadata, usually within the metadata, and that might be something that we're coming to for books, and actually that will be beneficial because sometimes what the end users need is actually much more about the content, but that's specific to their audience, their library community, for example, and that's not something that the publisher can necessarily put in. So we talked about that, and whether we were moving towards a sort of a centralized lake of book content and metadata somewhere, and then we all confused ourselves. But we did talk about perhaps there's a need for some kind of data confidence level that we could apply to metadata. So we could say, we know this metadata is quite old, it's quite an old book, but we think it's still valid, it might just be incomplete, and whether we could start to assign some confidence to our data so that everybody knew what they were dealing with, and that as data got enriched, they would be aware that there was better data out there. So sorry, I said data a lot then, but that really was what we were talking about. So those are the conclusions we reached. And thank you to my group for a great discussion.
Thank you to Group C. My wife's forever taking the mickey out of me, saying that I miss the obvious. I don't notice obvious things. I've just realised there's a massive countdown clock there saying we've got 32 minutes left. So the good news is that you can take all the time you want, Group D.
And that's also the bad news.
That's also the bad news. We have Laurie and we have Deborah who are going to share the feedback from Group D on community engagement.
So before we start, though, we had one thing that we had to do, and that was make Lou and Godwin's proud. So we did bring our sheet, and where it says workshop recap, the smiley face. Show them where the smiley face is.
It's roundabout.
Yeah, right
there.
Yeah, circle
so
that.
Please do that.
Before we start talking.
So we had great fun in our workshop. I don't know whether you all had a bit of fun, but we had to start off with a bit of a whoop whoop
and all that, just to get it going. And also, the dynamics in the room were fantastic. We had a great mix as well. We had publishers, we had researchers, we had librarians and intermediaries, and a good mix of views and stress points for sure.
Yeah, I think the first session that we had was we had to define what community was and what that was to us individually. And then the second session, we took that and we defined what engagement was to us. And we all, like we mentioned, we had librarians, we had a whole diverse group, so it all meant something different. And so we worked together in groups to define what we thought that was and who the relevant players and the roles in our communities were. And I think, go ahead.
It made us all really think. So who is our community? Who is it externally or who is it internally? And there was, again, a great mix of that throughout the room. And we took a whole session just to identify that. This was great.
I think this is the slide that resonated with a lot of us, and one of the things that we had to do was do a survey on how we thought our organization did as far as community engagement. And I think a lot of us would have answered, I think we got like not well, pretty well, kind of well, very well, well, and I think all of us kind of went the middle of the road or pretty well. We thought we did really good, and this is where I think it kind of stopped us in our tracks, because a lot of organizations feel like that engagement is maybe a survey, and they got responses back. So, we engaged, we got responses. But actually what we found out is that's where most organizations stop, and they think that that's engagement. Instead, most of us are just informing. And so how can we take that survey and actually turn it into actual engagement with the people we did the survey with?
And it's actually all right. Of course, it's great that you've done a survey, you've ticked the box, you've done it. But to then go on, as Laurie said, to D and E is probably a little bit tougher and a bit more of a challenge. But that's probably the exciting bit, to be honest.
Yeah, and it also requires a lot of active listening.
Yeah.
And what we learned through this is our customers, whoever that may be to you, it's all about the trust factor that we've heard this whole entire series about how we want our customers to trust us and how do we do that. And so I think becoming real people to our customers, not being behind a screen or an email or a survey. People get to know us. We have an interest in them as well.
So we came up with these key points about what a better community engagement looks like. And those I'm sure most of you will recognize that you're doing or you're trying, or perhaps you can take some of these ideas away and give them a go yourselves. Or employ someone like Lou, an organization like Lou's, or the other ones in the room to help you with that.
That was our
Making
plug.
you proud.
Yeah, that was our plug. And I think recognizing where maybe your community doesn't feel heard. Sometimes that's a two-way street as well. We discussed that and where those gaps and opportunities are that we need to do. But I think one of the most important things in this whole entire slide is the feedback loop. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I personally learned was that the community doesn't always win. They may come to you with ideas and things that may be able to improve your processes, may be able to help your organization in some way. It's okay if your community doesn't win. What is important is how we let our community know why we've made the decisions we have made and how we relay that information to them. At least then your community will still feel like their opinions were valued, they were heard, and why we came to the decisions that we came to.
And that loop that Laurie just mentioned there, that was really interesting and again eye-opening for me. It's not a straight line, it's not an end to an end, right, we'll send the survey out, we'll get the answers. It's actually, we'll send the survey out, we'll get the answers, we'll come back round, we'll have a look, we'll adapt, we'll adjust, and we'll learn along the way. And I think, although it's kind of obvious now, I don't know whether a lot of organisations do it in that way.
I'm going to go back just to one. I think one thing that's important here too is I said that some organizations stop at C. They do the surveys and they think, okay, I have engaged. I want to reiterate what Lou and Godwin's relayed to us was that's okay. I mean, if that is what you're doing and it's working, that is okay to do. You do not need to feel bad about that. But if you do want to take that further, then you can go into D and E.
So then, maybe I'm jumping a bit, but at the end, Lou and Godwin's asked us, so how do you all feel? How do you all feel now the workshop's over and you've got a few ideas? And there was one in the room, Bernie, I'm going to mention you, that went, oh my God, I've got so much to do. How do I do this? Da 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 da. But that's all right too. That's like really positive that there's so many ideas. And with OASPA being the organisation that you have a small team and a massive community to reach. But don't we all?
Yeah, and I think she mentioned she had several communities, right? And so then how do you prioritize that? But we kind of talked about that's what we do in our everyday life. We prioritize what we do in our jobs, and so we just need to prioritize those communities like we do every single day. And then in the end, I think, go ahead, I'll let you.
Oh, so our whole thing that we sort of suddenly, again, struck on it right at the end was actually we want to continue this conversation.
Actually, our group doesn't know that yet, so just a heads up. We decided this, right? Yeah, we decided.
We need to continue to talk because, as I said at the beginning, it was such an engaging, varied an audience. And yeah, we were really in it, weren't we, and having good fun. And we should continue this because as we all go out there and do it, we'll come back with ideas and ways that worked and things that perhaps didn't work as well. So
right, and how we can help each other out, like what may be something you have done that I can try and vice versa. But I think at the end, just to kind of summarize, engagement is built, it's not announced, and it needs to be intentional in the within your community. And I was saying that was my word for 2026 was to be intentional. So I think this was, if you come back next year, which I would strongly encourage you to, because I think it's been a fabulous conference. I really think if you attended another session, please try to attend this one this year. Next year it was absolutely fabulous. So thank you, Lou and Godwin's for teaching us. And we only took up 6 minutes. Sorry.
And we didn't practice or anything. I think we did pretty well.
We did.
Thank you. For two people who confessed they were really, really nervous and saying they were going to wing it, I think they just did an absolutely superb job, so thank you very much. Group D, by the way, was a source of genuine drama first thing this morning because, shock horror, their screen didn't work. So I want to give a really important and genuine shout out to the fabulous AV team who have been supporting us throughout the conference, who rushed to Group D's aid this morning. So thank you very much, guys. And with that, finally, last but by no means least, here is Rachel from Elsevier to tell us all about the discussions and outcomes they had in the Responding to Global Emergencies session.
Thanks so much. My name is Rachel. I'm the chair of the Social Responsibility Committee at STM, and in my day job I work for Elsevier. I co-organised this with Sarah Phipps from STM, Hilka from STM, and Claire from Sense About Science, although I can't see her right there. Everyone who was in group workshop E, can you raise your hands? Because you were a fabulous group. We had engaged conversations because, and the context to this is that we are living in 2026 and the world has fundamentally changed. The threat of war, we've all lived through a pandemic. The idea that our macro trends are going to impact scholarly publishing and what we do is really, really critical right now. And that's the context for this workshop, which was looking at global emergencies. So our objective was to figure out, what is an emergency? Is it a disaster? Is it a crisis? What does it mean? And we had really wide-ranging discussions. Is it around war and conflict? Is it around public health? Is it around things such as a hack or an outage of the web, which might actually affect our platforms? So what we decided on very quickly is to figure out what kind of shared idea might this be, kind of think about what our role might be in terms of scholarly communication, identify, an idea that we could pursue, and of course, actually turn this into something a bit concrete. So, what did we get up to? Well, we had an idea that basically there are two types of what we call emergency situations. One is an immediate one, that's shock. Something happens, we have to respond. And then there's sort of a second one, which is more around what we call a longer-term response, a restoration, where we may need a longer-term impact or activities, for example, in times of conflict. And what we really focused on and what the guys did was to think of a design sprint. So what we wanted to think about is, okay, what kind of is the most pressing thing that breaks in an emergency situation? And that's access to trusted information. The solution was obviously to think about access, but it's 2026. I mean, we find and digest information in such radically different ways these days. So we're also thinking about federating the content, looking at interoperability, and looking at like a layer on top, which could help with translations, for example, summarization. And we had a lot of conversations around who's the audience here. Is it policymakers? Is it researchers? Is it practitioners? And each of them have very different needs. So what's next? STM is going to form a task and finish group on that, a TFG, not a big friendly giant, but a TFG. And essentially what we're going to do is have a bit more of a digest. All of this input was a great first discussion to think about what does it mean, to think about those extra things that we hadn't considered before we took on this project. So we want to assess the user needs, we want to map the stakeholders. We can't do this alone. We need to be able to be integrating into existing emergency responses, which may come at a government level, it may come at a regional level, it could come in different ways in different organizations. So who are those people and how can we engage with them? And we want to build coalitions because essentially we can't have a fragmented approach when we think about it. You only have to remember COVID and our response there. And we want to be looking at not duplicating efforts in terms of auditing platforms. And of course, we need some governance structure around it. And what we want to do is create a proposal for an industry consultation. This has to be something that we co-develop together, that we all buy into, and that we can all support. And essentially, our little final thing, I don't have an interpretive dance, I don't have a poem, but we did come up with a spirit animal. So if you're in the UK and there's an emergency, there's a Cobra team, and they come and they get together, and that was an awesome animal. And I was trying to think, we need another awesome animal. I did think of an emu, did think of some other things that were not appropriate. But what we thought about maybe is we need to, channel the owl here, where we're looking at organization, we're looking at watching, and we're looking at leading. So that was our feedback.
Thank you, Rachel, and thanks again to all of the presenters who came up. Can we just have another round of applause, please, for everyone who came up and presented? Thank you.